All right, so are you ready to dive into Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk today? This isn't about giving up everything and, going to live in a monastery or anything like that.
Definitely not. It's more about bringing those monk-like principles into our crazy everyday lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Like, how do we find that peace and purpose in the middle of all the chaos of our modern lives?
That's a great question. And Shetty really dives right in with this story about how he almost chose a bar over a monk workshop.
Wait, really?
Yeah, but he only went to the workshop because they promised a bar afterwards.
Okay, so he's not all serious monk business all the time. I like that.
Right. It's about incorporating the wisdom, not, becoming a monk overnight.
Hmm.
But speaking of monks, he talks about this idea of a dusty mirror to kind of illustrate his point.
A dusty mirror. I'm intrigued.
So picture this. You walk into this old, dusty room with cobwebs everywhere, and there's this mirror, but it's so covered in grime that you can barely see yourself. That's kind of like our minds, right? Our true potential is hidden beneath all these layers of external pressures and internal doubts.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
It is, right. So the question is, how do we even begin to wipe away all that dust and see ourselves more clearly?
Right. And what really struck me was how Shetty talked about all the stuff we inherit without even realizing it. Like he talks about how he actually started out in finance just to please his parents, even though it made him completely miserable.
It's so true. It's easy to just absorb the values of our families, our culture, even our social media feeds without ever stopping to ask if those values actually resonate with us.
It's like we're trying to see our reflection in a funhouse mirror, all distorted by other people's expectations.
Exactly. And that's why he has this whole exercise in the book about where your values come from. It's really
Well,
interesting.
yeah, where did your values come from?
Yeah,
Exercise. Don't worry, we're not going to make you do it. Or are we?
maybe later. But seriously, just becoming aware of those influences is a huge step towards clearing away some of that dust and seeing ourselves more clearly.
So how do we actually do that? Like Shetty talks about his experience at the ashram with sensory deprivation. No mirrors, simple food, very limited contact with the outside world. It sounds intense.
Yeah, and you're probably thinking, I'm not about to shave my head and live in silence to find some clarity.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But Shady's point is that even creating a little bit of space for introspection, even if it's just for a few minutes each day, can make a huge difference. It's like pressing pause on all that external noise for a little while.
So it's about finding those quiet moments in the chaos. Which reminds me of how he talked about struggling to meditate even as a monk.
Oh, yeah. He said even monks have trouble with their minds wandering during meditation.
See, it's not just me. So if you've ever tried to meditate and felt like a total failure, you're in good company.
Exactly. It's not about emptying your mind completely. It's more about learning to observe those thoughts, what he calls the monkey mind, without getting totally swept away by them.
Oh, the monkey mind. That constant chatter jumping from one thought to the next,
Oh.
always worrying, planning, judging. It's exhausting.
It really is. And taming that monkey mind is a big part of what this book is all about. It's like the key to finding that inner peace we're all craving. You know, those times when worries or doubts just spiral out of control? That's your monkey mind in action.
Oh, yeah. I know that feeling all too well.
Hmm.
So this next part is about how to actually manage that inner chaos, right? So how do we tame this monkey mind? It's not like we can just like put it in a cage or something, right?
Right. It's more about learning to manage it. And one of the first steps is recognizing just how contagious negativity can be.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah.
One minute you're feeling fine, the next you're scrolling through social media, comparing yourself to everyone else's highlight reel.
Exactly. Shetty actually compares negativity to the flu. It spreads so easily, and before you know it, you're totally caught up in it.
It's like a collective case of the Mondays.
Mhm.
But instead of it being Monday, it's like all the time.
Right. And the book talks about how important it is to not just spot that negativity, but to actually stop it in its tracks.
Okay, but how do you actually do that? Like when you're feeling down, it's not that easy to just snap your fingers and be happy.
You're right. It takes practice. But Shetty suggests trying to swap out those negative thoughts for more positive ones. What's one negative thought pattern you'd like to change?
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, I think for me is that voice of self-doubt that pops up whenever I'm trying something new?
Absolutely. That inner critic can be so loud. But the good news is that we have the power to choose where we focus our attention.
So it's about shifting our focus from those negative thoughts to something more positive.
Mm.
Which brings us to another biggie. Fear Shetty talks about understanding our fears instead of trying to get rid of them completely.
Yeah, and he tells this really interesting story about confronting his own childhood fears during meditation.
What happened?
Well, he realized that these fears from his past were still influencing his decisions as an adult, even though they weren't really relevant anymore. It's like they were holding him back without him even realizing it.
It's like those fears become these invisible barriers in our minds. But how do we actually break through them?
Well, Shetty actually quotes Alex Honnold, the free solo climber,
Wait, the guy who climbs mountains without any ropes.
the one and only. Well, Honnold talks about expanding your comfort zone through practice, basically working through the fear until it's not scary anymore.
That's easy for him to say. He's like superhuman or something.
Right. But the point is that we can all apply that principle to our own lives. We can all free solo our fears, whatever they may be.
So it's about facing our fears head on
Mhm.
instead of letting them control us. But how do we actually do that in a way that doesn't feel completely terrifying?
It's about taking small, calculated risks and gradually building up our confidence. It's like if our comfort zones are these little circles we live in, free soloing our fears is about pushing the edges of that circle outward bit by bit.
I like that analogy. So
Yeah.
what's something you'd like to free solo in your own life?
That's a good question. I think for me it would be public speaking. I've always been terrified of it. What about you?
Maybe it's finally trying that pottery class I've been thinking about. I've always wanted to, but I
Yeah.
don't know. I've just been too scared to actually go for it.
I get it. But imagine how good it would feel to finally overcome that fear.
It would be amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about letting go of those external pressures and taming those internal monkeys. But where does all of this lead us? What's the end goal?
Well, this is where things get really interesting because the next part of the book is all about living with purpose. And Shetty connects that directly to this idea of dharma.
Dharma. Like in a spiritual sense?
Kind of,
Yeah.
but he doesn't mean it in some mystical, predetermined way. It's actually very down to earth and practical.
So, dharma. It's not like we have to go on some big journey to, like, find our dharma.
Not at all. Actually, Shetty uses his own experience as an example. Remember he talked about how much he hated that finance job?
Yeah.
Well, back in college, he started this club called Think Out Loud, where he would basically share these monk-inspired ideas with his friends. And that's when he realized that his real passion was teaching and helping others.
So he's like, wait a minute. I actually really enjoy this.
Exactly. It wasn't about some big aha moment. It was more like recognizing this thing that already lit him up.
That's kind of cool. It's like
Yeah.
our dharma is already within us. We just have to be paying attention enough to see it.
That's a really good way to put it. It's not about searching for something outside of ourselves. It's more about tuning in to what's already there.
Okay, so no treasure hunt for some hidden dharma.
Yeah.
But how do we actually start to do that? Like, what are some concrete steps?
Well, Shetty talks about this idea of recognizing our strengths and our passions and then finding ways to use them to make a meaningful contribution.
This is where that quadrants of potential thing comes in, right?
Yeah.
The exercise where he asks, do you like your job?
Mhm.
Are you good at it? And do other people like it?
Right. It seems so simple, but it's really powerful.
Yeah, because it makes you think about, like, whether your job actually aligns with who you are.
Exactly. Like if the answer is yes to all three of those questions, you're probably on the right track. But if not, it might be a sign to maybe switch things up a bit.
Yeah, like maybe you need to find ways to bring more of your passions into your work. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's time to explore something totally new.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot where your skills and passions align with a real need in the world.
And it makes you feel good too, right? Like it's not just about finding work that you're good at. It's about finding work that lights you up.
Absolutely. And Shetty also talks about this idea of seva, which is all about selfless service.
Seva, what does that mean exactly?
It's kind of like shifting your mindset from what's in it for me to how can I contribute.
I like that.
It's about using your unique skills and passions to make a positive impact on the world, even if it's in small, everyday ways.
So it doesn't have to be like this huge dramatic thing.
Not at all. It could be volunteering in your community, mentoring someone, or even just being a more present and supportive friend or family member.
It's about those little acts of kindness that add up over time.
Right. Exactly. And what's cool? Shetty emphasizes that serving others doesn't have to be purely selfless. If it brings you joy or helps you grow as a person, that's a bonus.
So it's like a win-win. You're helping others and you're helping yourself at the same time.
Exactly. The whole point is to shift our focus from me to we, to remember that we're all connected in this journey of life.
Like those redwood trees he talks about, right? How their roots all intertwine and support each other.
Yes. And when we embrace that same interconnectedness, it's amazing how much more purpose and fulfillment we experience in our own lives.
It's like we're all part of something much bigger than ourselves. Well, this has been a truly inspiring deep dive. Think Like a Monk is full of so much practical wisdom and actionable advice.
It really is. It's a powerful reminder that no matter who we are or where we come from, we all have the potential to live more meaningful lives.
And to bring a little bit of that monk-like peace and purpose into our everyday lives. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Keep those minds curious, and remember, you don't need a robe to think like a monk.